If you remember during the summer, we made a few videos talking about the Vancouver Canucks and their trading activities because, oh boy, the trades and everything they wanted to try and do, very public. A lot of insiders out there leaking stuff into the media. We saw Oliver Ekman-Larsson talks. We saw, the free agency things they were trying to do as well. Tyson Barrie was something the Vancouver Canucks tried but ultimately failed in doing. But one of the things we did make a video about as well was the Vancouver Canucks and what they were doing with the Arizona Coyotes and how there was actually a few rejections made. This was a video talking about how the Vancouver Canucks rejected the Arizona Coyotes' asking price for Thatcher Demko. This was a video talking about the Oliver Ekman-Larsson thing, and we know the Ekman-Larsson thing didn't go through, but one of the asks that Arizona had involved Vancouver Canucks starting netminder backup middle of the pack, 1A, 1B? What do we even say about him at this point? He's a guy who has got a bad save percentage, a bad goals against average this year. He's statistically really bad, Thatcher Demko. But the problem with the Canucks is that Demko is not the problem. It's the team just completely putting him in terrible situations. Demko has been amazing once in a while, and when he is not amazing, hey, he's letting in goals that not every goalie in the world is going to be able to save. You just love stopping pucks that are coming out there from your defense who is turning it over in their own defensive zone. But that's besides the point. That's just a little aside there. Demko, you might take a look at the numbers and think he's bad. Nope, he's not bad. He's just playing for the Canucks. But that video talked about how Demko, the ask for Thatcher Demko, was rejected by Vancouver from Arizona. Well, we have ourselves David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period coming out with an article the other day talking about how there was another team out there asking for Demko, but the Canucks also said no. Let's go over onto the most recent piece published onto thefourthperiod.com. Sunday Best Activity Afoot Amongst Most Canadian Teams. Published by David Pagnotta, as we noted, NHL insider, SiriusXM, NHL analyst. He comes over onto the radio here in Vancouver once in a while. Take a look at this article and what he says about the Vancouver Canucks. It's the segment here, Trouble in Vancouver. And, there's a lot of stuff going on with the Canucks. They talk about Jake Virtanen. He's available. We already made 2 videos in a row about that, so I'm not going to burden you with having to listen to more Virtanen trade talk. There's stuff about Alex Edler, Jalen Chatfield in here, Toronto, Austin Matthews. Take a look at this paragraph right here. During the offseason, Canucks GM Jim Benning tried to move out salary. He just wasn't willing to pay the premium to do it. I don't know the cost for eating Louis Eriksson's contract, but it had to be hefty. Benning's inability to move out Eriksson or Sutter made it challenging for him to add much more to the roster. They couldn't make a trade for Oliver Ekman-Larsson work, and they ultimately landed teammate Nate Schmidt instead. Nate is great in the room, but needs to be better on the ice. Aside, I agree. The Canucks also tried to get Matt Dumba from the Minnesota Wild before free agency, but talk centered around Thatcher Demko, not Brock Besser. And a Minnesota source confirmed the ask included the 25-year-old netminder. Benning tried, but trying only gets you so far. There is unease atop the Canucks organization, and the guy signing the checks isn't happy. Benning is signed through the 2023 season, so I wonder, given the current economic climate, if a change to the GM position is realistic or not. It really comes down to how Francesco Aquilini, who has stayed off Twitter so far this month, feels about management's ability to climb out of this hole. Before we go over the Demko thing, because I know that's why you clicked on this video, Francesco Aquilini is going to have a very big coming home party when he turns on Twitter for the first time in a month and goes over to his notifications, the mentions, baby. Ooh, it's just going to be nasty. Vancouver Canucks fans were never the kindest bunch, especially on social media. Sometimes that's inappropriate. And I agree, it can get way out of hand once in a while. But when it comes to just the overall viciousness, how toxic Canucks fans can be, especially to the people who work for the organization, yeah, it's very toxic. So, Francesco Aquilini, I don't know if he's been on Twitter. If he has, then he's probably seen a lot of the meltdown that has gone on with the fan base, but aside from that, the actual thing I wanted to talk about here was that last sentence in that paragraph. The Canucks tried to get Matt Dumba, but the talk centered around Thatcher Demko and not Besser. The Wild were asking for Demko, but it looks like the Vancouver Canucks said no. And even though I've been out here just preaching foresight and talking about how the Canucks had none of it, at the very least, I appreciate that there was some foresight with that decision back before free agency started, because we kind of knew that there was some Matt Dumba, Brock Besser, Thatcher Demko stuff maybe going around. We made a video about that a few months ago as well, but this is the first actual confirmation, I think, we've had from a source saying that there was indeed an ask. It's just funny that that ask did not include Brock Besser this time. But for Thatcher Demko, I at least admire that the Vancouver Canucks went out there and they were like, okay, our plan here is set. Our plan is to go Demko and whoever the heck else we can bring in on free agency day, because Jacob Markstrom wasn't coming back. I think a lot of people in Vancouver will talk about how the Vancouver Canucks got rid of some of these other guys that are important to the team and all that, but Jacob Markstrom, for all we say that he has been great, he has been so good, he bailed this team out over and over and over again, which is true, the common consensus is that contract is still pretty hefty, and I don't know if the Vancouver Canucks would have been good matching a kind of contract that he got in Calgary, for the long term at least, because with this team and the way that this has been managed, the cap so far, imagine when PD and Hughes and Brock and Horvat are all going to need their big boy contracts, you know? I don't know if a Jacob Markstrom at a 6x6 is going to be suitable for having on the roster at that point, but at the very least, I appreciate that the Vancouver Canucks were not willing to bite the bullet and be like, okay, all we gotta do is just get rid of Demko, we can get Matt Dumba, and then we'll just re-sign Markstrom again, because all of a sudden, you know, we don't need to get Holtby anymore, let's just go sign Markstrom to 6x6, like, okay, calm down, buddy. I'm happy that the Vancouver Canucks went the way they did, because at the very least, I do think that Jacob Markstrom's contract is too big, but don't get it twisted. Even though I do agree that Markstrom's contract is really big, this team would have been better with Markstrom. That's it, plain and simple. On the flip side of the coin, though, it does make a lot of sense to me as to why the Minnesota Wild would want to go after Demko. We've noted this in several videos before, but the Wild don't have a #1 elite standard goaltending prospect. They almost traded to get the pick to get Yaroslav Askarov at the draft, but it didn't happen. That was the Matt Boldy thing. We made a video about that as well, so you can check out that video if you want to see the story on how that unfolded. But the Wild have so much great talent on their U24 core up on forward. Kevin Fiala, Kirill Kaprizov, Adam Beckman, Matt Boldy. You got so many great players over here. Marco Rossi, too. How did I forget that? Marat Kusnedinov. On defense, you have a few guys. Kalen Addison's a guy that I've liked for a long time. But in net, you know, it's a little bit subpar, not gonna lie. Kaapo Kähkönen is cool, but Thatcher Demko is probably a more solidified long-term bet, as would a Yaroslav Askarov could have been, which is why the Wild were trying to trade away Boldy to get that guy at the 2020 NHL draft. But regardless, the Vancouver Canucks said no, which in my opinion was the right decision, because if you ended up with Matt Dumba on this Canucks decor, then my goodness. I know Jacob Markstrom would probably be back in Vancouver if this went through, but you see how terrible this poor defensive Vancouver Canucks core is right now. Imagine if they had Dumba on there instead of who would be there? Hamonic? Okay, Hamonic, imagine he gets injured again. Chatfield, imagine instead of having the defensive shutdown Jalen Chatfield, who was a -4 against Toronto the other day, by the way. I think he just had a bad game. It's not really indicative of the rest of the playstyle he has. Matt Dumba's out there instead, imagine that. This team would be absolutely abysmal defensively, and I don't even know if Jacob Markstrom would have been able to bail out this team as much as he had in the past if this team suffered the same defensive lapses, plus more if they got a Dumba instead. So, long term, I think it was the better move to keep Demko, mostly because the Markstrom contract would have been so handcuffing in the long term. But unfortunately, the team is still playing poorly, so even though there's a nice little kind of tip to my hat that I'm giving over to the Vancouver Canucks for that, hey, you know, you're still bad, like, it just would have been a lot worse if you guys did this. From a defensive standpoint, who knows how good Markstrom could have been in trying to bail the team out, but I don't know if it would have been all too effective. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this, though. Link in the description to the article, as always. It talks about a few other things going on with Canadian teams and trade rumors and all that, so it's a very interesting read. Let me know in the comments what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99, and bye.